Hello, welcome back to my kitchen. First off, I just want to give myself a little pat on the back. I watched a video on how to put one of these lapel mics on a t-shirt because most of them are like collared shirts. And I thought, I mean, it looks like it is. We'll find out in the editing if it sounds like it should. The last few weeks I've had it on like a little tripod in front of me, and I wanted to try putting it closer to me because I noticed there's some static in there, and I'm pretty sure it's just because I have a cheap mic. So I figured if I put it closer to my mouth, then it'll be louder, and then I can turn down the volume on it, thus making the static quieter, because the static seems like it's a constant sound. So 4D chess right there. In terms of what we're making today, it's a new recipe. I've never done it before. I saw it on Reddit the other day, and I figured that'll be good for the old YouTube. And nothing in it is gonna be too complicated. There is a roux, but I mean, after the gumbo, we're roux experts. So nothing to fear there. But I just kind of wanted to do a show me as I work through the process of making a new recipe, because there's, a few things where you kind of have to make judgment calls on. And in this one, especially because I'm doubling the recipe, because it calls for beef stock and coconut milk, and both of those from the grocery store that I go to are roughly double what the recipe calls for, and I'm like, I'll just make twice as much. And that being said, with the mention of beef stock, this recipe, obviously not a meatless Monday, but it could be a meatless Monday pretty easily, because the only meat product is the beef stock. So if you take the beef stock out, it becomes vegetarian. And if you swap out the honey, it becomes vegan. And the recipe actually mentions using a sweet potato instead of one of the potatoes can swap for the honey. So that's how you can make this vegan. And then it also talks about, which I didn't read until I got home because I would have gotten some peas and whatnot. But it mentions you can add peas and tofu to kind of boost the protein, because I'm all about that protein here. But yeah, so like if you wanted to, I guess, be more filling, I don't know how filling it's gonna be. It's gonna be served with rice, so that usually makes something pretty filling. But yeah, so that kind of be a judgment call. I'm gonna try it straight as the recipe, and then in the future I'll probably try some of the variations to see how they go. Add some stuff in there. I mean, once you have a recipe, you can do whatever you want to it because it is now yours. You can just add new things and make it your whole new experience. I almost forgot to mention, next week is kind of running into a bit of a holiday along with my dad's birthday. So happy early birthday, because this will come out right before. So I'm gonna be visiting my parents. So a video next week is up in the air. In my head, I'm like, if I can film something and edit it within a day, like that's gonna be a fun little challenge of like, what can I make and edit within a day? So if a video does come out, it's gonna probably be like 5 minutes. But don't get your hopes up too high, because I'm gonna be in Maryland. Maybe, so no matter how I kind of do it, I'm not gonna be at my desktop long enough with film to edit it by dropping it on Tuesday like I usually do. So, because I was gonna say like, oh, I can make a video up in Maryland, but I won't have time by the time I get back down here to edit it for you guys. So I'll probably try and do something quick, either like the day I get back or like the day before I leave kind of situation. And we'll see what happens. Expect nothing. If you get something, kudos. If not, I warned you. I don't know about you, but I'm personally a little bit hungry. So let's get into cooking. Obviously starting off with listing the ingredients. Carrots, potatoes, onions, garlic, celery, beef stock, coconut milk, curry powder, flour, soy sauce, mirin, and honey. All right, so game plan. This recipe involves a fair bit of chopped vegetables, and so I figured first up should be a prep step so that you can kind of get all that sorted, and then you're done with cutting for the rest of the time. And so involved in that process is going to be the celery and onions, which I would group together because those are gonna go in the pot together. And then the carrots and potatoes also grouped together. And then finally the garlic, which that's not needed until the end. So the other two you actually will need pretty quick. So whether you do a prep step or not, you're gonna have to cut 4 of them. And I just did the garlic because then I can clean my cutting board and my knife, and I don't need to worry about cutting anything else up. It's just sitting, waiting to be dumped into a pan. So after all the prep has been done is when you kind of get into the actual recipe as it's written. Step one is going to be to sweat the onions and the celery, which that involves kind of heating them at a lower temperature. So it's like medium, like on mine I have, numbers, so I think I did it at 4. So you want to heat them not to brown, but just to have them release moisture, which makes sense with the term sweat, because when we sweat, we're releasing moisture. So just do that to the vegetables, but don't brown them. Then you want to turn up the heat a little bit, and the next step will be to add in the carrots and the potatoes. And then because you turned up the heat, you can now brown those. Well, you're browning everything. I kind of kept an eye on the potatoes, and once a majority of them kind of start getting browned edges, then I was like, all right, we're good to go to move on to the next step, which is to add in the beef stock, the soy sauce, and the mirin. And then you're gonna stir that all up, get it to a boil, and then you're gonna simmer it for 20 to 25 minutes. And while it's simmering, the recipe says while it's simmering, I'm branching off from the recipe in this step. I'm going rogue. The next step is going to be, once it's finished simmering, you want to add in the coconut milk and the honey, and then bring it back up to a boil, and then remove it from heat. And then what I'm gonna do after that step is then make the roux, because I feel like you don't want to let the roux just sit there for a long period of time. So I feel like you want to do it and then add it in. And since you're already removing the other thing from heat, this seems like a good place to fit it. So then I'm going to make the roux, which involves like essentially frying or like browning the garlic, and then adding in the flour and the curry powder, and then stirring it for 2 minutes to make the roux. So it's not the 30 minutes like with the gumbo. So it's just a 2-1, which I believe from the gumbo recipe, I think is called like a blonde. No, I think it's just a white roux, because blonde would be having some color to it. So I'm gonna assume it's a white roux. We're gonna fact check myself, see if I'm learning while we're going. Now that we have the roux, all that's left is to add that back to the curry itself, stir it in, and then serve with rice. So like I said in the game plan, the first step is going to be the prep step. Now that everything's chopped up, the next step is going to be to put the onions and the celery into the pan to sweat them. Maybe we'll rename the pan to the sauna just for this step. Now that the celery and the onions are sweaty and in a larger pot, because I cannot judge volume, next is to add the carrots and the potatoes in, and also turn up the heat. Now that the potatoes, well, I guess it's pretty much everything is kind of browned up a little bit, but I'm more gauging off of the potatoes. The next step is going to be to add in the beef stock, the mirin, and the soy sauce. And then boil it, then simmer it for 20 to 25 minutes. Now that we've simmered the curry, I guess it's essentially going to be called now, the next step is to add in the coconut milk as well as the honey. Then we want to bring it all up to a boil and then remove it from heat. Now that the curry is removed from heat, the next step is going to be to make the roux, and that's going to be to put the oil into a pan, then add the garlic because we want to brown that before adding in the flour. And then once the garlic is browned, then we add in the flour along with the curry powder. So I know in the game plan I mentioned that the roux was going to be like the white roux because I was trying to, flex my knowledge. Then I forgot that the curry powder is going to be in there, so that the color of it goes out the window. You're just going to have to kind of time it, eyeball it. I believe it says 2 minutes, so just stir it for 2 minutes and then you'll be done. Now that we have the roux, the next step is to add that back into the curry that we have, stir it up so that it can thicken, and then we're ready to serve and enjoy. All right, so here's the final product. I'm gonna get it. I can't tip it because even though the roux did thicken up, which I'm always amazed by, like roux or just like thickening agents in general, because it's like a soup. You add that in there, you kind of stir it for a little bit, you're like, this didn't thicken up, and you give it like a minute. I know that it is supposed to happen and I know how it's happening. It's still just, I'm just like, wow. Who thought of that? Who was like, you know what, let's make some oil, some flour, and then we'll put that into the soup and then it'll be thicker into like a stew? I don't know the stages of thickness, what to call it, but somebody's real smart. So before I taste it, just kind of a run through of, thought process for the old ranking. To me, the recipe had very similar vibes to the chicken and kale sweet potato recipe that I made, I think pretty early on, where it's probably just the fact that it's like Dutch oven and kind of like the coconut milk, but it kind of reminded me of that. It's pretty similar difficulty level. I would assume that this will reheat well because it's essentially a soup, so I'll just have to put it in a pan to heat it up throughout the week for snacks or lunches. So I'm pretty confident about it being solid there. Also, it smells great. This is gonna be one of those recipes that I need to leave my apartment and then come back and then just be like, oh. Cause like even while I'm making it, it smells fantastic. Just curry powder in general. Just like once I was measuring it out, I'm like, this is gonna be fantastic. The only way that I could see an issue is when I was doing the roux, it felt a little grainy, but I think that might just be the curry powder in there. Probably isn't acting the same way that the flour was acting with the oil. So if that texture is present within the curry itself, that might be a slight issue. But beyond that, I don't foresee any issues. We'll see how all the flavors kind of blend together. I can see this being a pretty easy to like add some like meat or trying like the peas or tofu that the recipe suggests. That it can definitely be elevated. So I don't know if I should hold that against the recipe or not, because I mean, any recipe you can improve. That was the issue that I had with the world's best lasagna. You make that claim, there's gonna be issues, but this one's not making any bold claims like that, so I feel like I shouldn't hold that against it. But I think I'm gonna give it a taste and let you know how that goes. All right, so I need to get the rice. This is gonna be hard to get like all the things in there, but I'll do my best. All right. All right, now we're talking. Just for good measure, one more. That was lovely. I feel like some more spices probably could be added in there, but because it's not very overpowering, which is a good thing. But I feel like it does have a little bit of room of like something could be added to elevate that flavor. But like, oh, the potatoes just like melted in my mouth. They're cooked perfectly. And I mean, anything with rice is always great, especially when it's kind of soupy like that, because then it gets absorbed in there. And the grainy issue wasn't there. So, oh, this is definitely a good quality one. I mean, like, I'm kind of on the fence here, because I feel like I need to be more critical of these recipes, but at the same time, I'm a simple man. I put something good in my mouth and I'm like, yes, more of that, please. And because I'm a simple man, I'll stick to my roots, stick to my guns, and not try and be some fancy critic. 5 out of 5. I guess this one was somewhat valid because I hadn't tried it before. So I wasn't planning on, like, because I usually only select recipes that I like. This being my first time making it and it being a 5 out of 5, high praise. Also, I'm happy because now I have another great recipe that I can make. And I mean, without the filming, obviously, it's quick. Well, I mean, you obviously have that 20-minute point, but beyond that, it's fast. And then the rice pretty much takes about the same amount of time that like the simmering takes. So I started the rice right when I started the simmering, and they both ended around the same time. I'm I'm now losing focus because I just want to go eat dinner. So on that note, bye Mom, still not dead. See you.